Get ready for success. Leadership Strategies for Women is a show dedicated to providing practical and valuable strategies for emerging women leaders of today. It's your time to get inspired, motivated, and challenged to achieve your vision for success. And now, here's leadership speaker and coach, Ellie Nieves.
This is Leadership Strategies for Women Radio, and I'm your host, Ellie Nieves. I'm the founder and president of Leadership Strategies for Women, where I develop seminars and webinars to help women show up, speak up, and step up in their careers. I also coach women who want to achieve more both personally and professionally. To learn more, please visit my website at leadershipstrategiesforwomen.com, or you can follow the Leadership Strategies for Women page on Facebook. Our guest today is Kathy Thornton-Bias, and Kathy is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Verlo Mattress, where she is tasked with providing strategic leadership and overseeing the daily operations of the sleep products company. Prior to assuming her role at Verlo, Kathy was the North American President of the consumer electronics company Bang & Olufsen. In addition to her time at Bang & Olufsen, Thornton-Bias has held leadership positions at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, In Style Magazine, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Target. She has also been included on Essence Magazine's Game Changers, The Power List, and Ebony's Ebony Power 100. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Ellie, thanks so much for having me, and congratulations on the show. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm really excited to have you on the show, and I know that our listeners are anxious to hear more about your background. Can you share a little bit with us?
Sure. Well, people say that you fall into careers sometimes. I was not one of the lucky few who kind of grew up knowing exactly what I wanted to be in life. And certainly my parents had very strong opinions for what I should do professionally. But, I really kind of struggled throughout college to figure out where my skills lied and sort of how to apply those skills in a career. And so, I was one of those kids that graduated, luckily, with a job, knock on wood. But I would say that I wasn't the person who knew what they wanted to do right away. Some people know they want to be doctors and they know they want to be lawyers, or they have great skills to be engineers, and they nurture that, throughout their education. I didn't know that. And so for me, college was kind of eye-opening because it gave me access and experience in so many different kinds of things that let me think about what I wanted to do, next for myself.
That's really encouraging to hear that you had that kind of a background. So that's really great. And you've attained a great level of success in your career. Did you always aspire to be the president of a company?
Well, according to my parents, yes. I was always very bossy. I was always the one that needed to be in charge or wanted to be in charge. When the neighborhood kids wanted to, play hide and seek at night, I was the one kind of leading the charge for that. And my first job actually was babysitting, and I started getting booked to the point where I couldn't meet the demands of my customers, so I organized a consortium at 13 years old where I had my friends working for me, and I would manage our schedules and send them out on jobs, on the weekend. So I had a little sort of babysitting company at an early age, and so it somewhat came natural to me working with people and solving problems, which is really all business, is about. And, I think, again, going back to my studies at the University of Virginia, where I attended undergrad, I had a very broad sort of liberal arts background, and I was able to use that for almost any, interview that I had, whether it was banking, whether it was considering law school at some point, whether it was going into fashion and retailing. So, I think for people who believe that you have to know what you want to do right away, I don't believe that's the case. I think that through experience and through opportunity, you can kind of learn who you want to become. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was very much a learning, process. I don't think when I joined Saks Fifth Avenue as an executive trainee in 1988 that I said to myself, oh, you'll be the president of Saks. I didn't say that initially. But once I started doing the work, for a couple of years, I knew that I loved the industry, and this is where I wanted to spend my time. And so I did have very clear expectations of myself that if you're going to work, you might as well be in charge. And so in my brain, I think I told myself, and I remember saying this to someone years and years ago, that, okay, well, I'll be a vice president at 30, and then I'll be a president by 40, and then I should be a CEO by 50. And that's just what I always had in my mind. And so, knock on wood, I'm working on that CEO title, but, that's sort of what's happened. But you have to sort of set your mind for those sorts of goals. And I got some very good advice from someone really early on in my career that, your career is your responsibility. And you can't sort of sit back and let other people drive the direction that you go or drive the pace in which you go forward. Your career is your responsibility. That means networking. That means keeping your resume up to date. That means asking for promotions. That means putting yourself in a position to be promoted. All those things are your responsibility. It's not your supervisor's responsibility to promote you. It's your responsibility to get promoted. And that gave me sort of a different thinking around what my role was in my life and my career. And so I took it very seriously. And I said, well, if it's up to me, I'll be a vice president at 30. And so let's go about setting that course. And I think those words of advice were really, really helpful for me because it's easy to become complacent and sort of sit back and make it someone else's job to make you a better employee or to get you promoted or to get you hired in a bigger company. And, in fact, it's our job, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the opportunities that you leveraged and some of the other decisions that you made, and I'm talking more tactfully speaking in terms of how maybe you did position yourself that really led to where you are today?
Yeah, well, so my first company that I worked for was Saks Fifth Avenue, one of the world's premier, luxury retail stores. And I was at Saks Fifth Avenue a total of 12 years, 10 years the first time and 2 years the second time. And one thing that really helped me there was just being open to go where no one else would go. So literally I had a new job every 18 months or so, 18 to 24 months, I was getting promoted. And it wasn't that I was being promoted in a siloed environment. I was going into other divisions and other departments. And when they said, hey, let's start up a planning organization, I raised my hand. Okay, I'll go there. So you have to be willing to do things that are slightly uncomfortable and do things that are slightly off the normal path and be open to that. And so I have lots of colleagues and friends who grew up with me at Saks Fifth Avenue who wanted to be just a buyer. They wanted to be a buyer, what they wanted to do, fashion was their thing, and that was sort of their view of their career. And I just had a broader view, and I always made myself available to people who were thinking about doing new things at the company. So, and they knew that I had an appetite for change. So, hey, we're going to start up a new division, or we're going to start an e-commerce area for Saks, or there's an opening in men's, but she's in women's. Would she go? Yeah, she'd go. She's really interested in learning. And so what I gained from that is learning a lot more about the business than many of my peers and colleagues at my level, because I had worked in so many different areas. So by the time I left there, I literally worked in almost every division of the company.
So you really extended yourself out there regardless of the position, even if it did make you uncomfortable, because at the end it was really a stretching and development opportunity.
It was, and it's also a visibility opportunity. And I can't emphasize that enough, that being known in your own backyard is not the same as being known throughout the whole town.
Mm-hmm.
And so by moving into different areas and different departments within the same company, you get a reputation for your work and for your aptitude and for your energy level and it extends far beyond if you'd only stayed in one division under one group of people. And so for me, just gaining visibility in the organization got my name to be at least in the considered set when conversations were had about promotability.
Mm-hmm.
Because more people in the room had worked with me than almost any other candidate at any given time, because I'd worked in so many different divisions.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't say that was a deliberate strategy on my part, but in hindsight, it was a real advantage for me. And I would say if I was telling my 30-year-old self something, I would say, hey, definitely do that, because it's going to raise your visibility in the company, broadly speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if your intention is to stay at your company, for many years. And that was a little unusual. Most of my friends were moving from company to company back then. And for me to stay at a company, for 10 years in one stretch was quite abnormal.
Right.
But again, if the company is treating you well, you're moving up in your career and you're learning, for me, there was no need to hop around.
Mm-hmm. So what is one key leadership lesson that you've learned in your career that has helped to foster executive leadership for you?
I tend to hire people that are smarter than me. And I do it quite deliberately because, one, I'm very comfortable with what I'm good at doing and my own skill set. And two, I'm constantly wanting people on my team that raise the bar exponentially. And so my mindset is never that, I run the department, I'm the boss. I mean, I am, practically speaking, but in terms of how we conduct our business and how we think about strategy and growth and action tactics, it takes lots of muscles to do that heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. And so, my muscles are pretty good, but they could be better with someone else with great muscles too. So you're just able to do more with really smart, talented people. And so I tend to overhire. That's been sort of a mantra of mine for a while. And I don't mind, even if I'm running the show, I don't mind being the dumbest person at the table at all, because my team is always so solid and their skills are so much more important than my ego. And so I hire really smart people.
And what are some of the challenges that you face as you've climbed up the ladder of success?
Well, I think, being a woman and being a woman of color is always sort of the elephant in the room. It can be very isolating when you don't feel part of the thing that you're doing because of all the cultural difference and nuance. And so, for most of my adult life, I have been in isolation, quote unquote, meaning not around, other women in some cases, if you're in a very male-dominated industry like consumer electronics. I mean, I would go to trade shows with Bang & Olufsen, and there would be 90% of the room or the trade show would be men, and 10% would be women. And, in fact, at one trade show, the lunchtime entertainment was the Denver Bronco cheerleaders, that were barely dressed, mm-hmm. and they're bouncing around the trade show. And I'm looking around like, is this really happening? In the new millennium, is this actually happening? And it does. Mm-hmm. And so it just reminds you sometimes how out of balance, the world still is with regard to just cultural nuance and sensitivity. So that's always been sort of an undercurrent, I would say. At times it's stronger.
So, Kathy, what advice do you have for emerging women leaders who want to develop a pace or a path towards the C-suite?
My advice would be to, first of all, congratulate them on having that aspiration, and to also say you can have it all. just not at the same time. And so I think it's really our obligation as sort of senior executives, women particularly, to debunk this myth that you can have it all at the same time, that you can be the world's greatest mom and the best wife and the CEO and charitable and sitting on boards, and that you can just do all this at the same time. You're going to make yourself insane. Mm-hmm. You can have it all, but you just can't do it at the same time. So if there's a time where you're going to make a commitment to your job, you're going to not be as involved in parenting because your job is going to take priority. Or if you're going to make a commitment to your parenting, you might not take that new promotion or move to that new company until such time that your kids are a little older, a little bit more, self-sufficient. One of the reasons that I was able to move to Milwaukee and take this new role with Verlo on a dime is because my husband and I are empty nesters. You know, our kids are all out of college. Well, the last one, hopefully, will be out of college this year. But, you know, the boys are working and they have their own lives and their own apartments. And so it gives me a lot of flexibility at this stage in my life to pursue my career in a really assertive way. But there were times where I had to make a choice. And, again, it doesn't deter what you want to achieve ultimately, but you have to be realistic about how many hours there are in a day. And so I'd say, girl, go for it. You can have it all, but just not at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So what role does faith play in your career?
This is the first time anyone's ever asked me this question. I was so curious by this question, but I'm happy to answer it because my faith sustains me. That is my source of strength. It's my source of confidence. It's my source of passion. I don't know that I would be in this position without my faith and my belief that this is God's plan for me. And I remember, times where it's been really stressful at work, or just really stressful, when we were in our NBA program at NYU, and I would need to step out of the room and just kind of close my eyes and just say a small prayer and just ask for guidance and ask for clarity. And for me, that still moment is where I can kind of rejuvenate and refocus, and I get clarity, and I can move forward. But my faith is the basis of my existence, whether it's my work existence or my home life existence. It's the basis of my existence, and from a very early age, it's been a very important foundational element for my family, and hopefully for my children as well. So, I don't take it into my workplace sort of on my arm every day, but for me and for what I need to do, it is at the core of who I am.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And I do ask the question because I am a woman of faith myself, and as I continue to climb up the ranks professionally on my own, I often share that it's because very similar to you, my faith also sustains me. And I don't think it has to be separate. And I think it's important to let other Christian women or other women who have faith understand that it's not two separate things. You can still be successful in your career, and you can still cling to your faith and your values as you move up the ranks. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking the question.
So what are some of your personal goals and your aspirations?
Other than world domination? I am, I've had I feel like I'm sounding like I'm 100 years old. I've had a really, really good career with more opportunity than a little skinny black girl from Kentucky could have ever imagined. But now I feel like it's time for me to bring more women and women of color along for this great ride. I'm 51 years old. I've been working since I was 13 years old in some way, shape, or form. And, I have aspirations for myself. I want to run a company. I want to be a CEO. I want all those things, and I believe that I will speak that into being, and that will happen for me. But I'm also increasingly more interested in doing things that help other women join me at the table, because it's time, one. Two, it's necessary for companies to think differently. I think it's good for business. And three, it's the legacy that I want to leave. You know, it's a Saturday. We're having this great conversation. I think I mentioned to you before we started that I'm heading to work. Mm-hmm. And I don't want that to be my legacy. That, you know, you'll read on my tombstone, she worked 70 hours a week. You know, she was a great employee. You know, I'd rather my legacy, Ellie, be that I helped someone, mm-hmm. and that I did something for someone else, and that my being here made a difference for somebody. And so, you know, increasingly I'm turning my attention towards how do I do that? How do I get, you know, more young women interested in business? How do I get them more interested in their own finances? How do I get them more interested in pursuing advanced degrees? I mean, you and I, you know, went to get our MBAs, you know, much later in life, but it was one of the smartest things I ever did. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I would be where I am today without that piece of paper. So I'm very glad that I made the decision. I was one of the oldest women in my class, and you know what? It worked out just fine. So it's never too late. And for me, I think I just want to find ways to touch other women and kind of get them to the table, so that they can enjoy the success that I've enjoyed, if that's their path. But the legacy can't be about, well, how hard I worked or what title I had when I was called home. It's got to be bigger than that. And so increasingly my attention and my capacity is turning towards that.
That's great. So, Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time to share about yourself and also sharing some really great strategies. You shared some really great nuggets of wisdom with our listeners today, and we really just appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you, Ellie. Again, really proud of what you're doing. The world needs this. So I'll be posting this all over, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Kathy. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, God bless.